you say so. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, good morning. I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 4968, the proposed GAA for 2015. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Resumption of consideration of House Bill 49680 is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we open the period of interpellation and debate for the proposed budget of the DFA to include the Office of the Secretary Proper, the Foreign Service Institute, the Technical Cooperation Council of the Philippines, and the UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines to include the International Commitments Fund. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
For this purpose, may now ask that we recognize Senator Legarda to sponsor and Senator Binay for her interventions.
Senator Lauren Legarda is recognized to sponsor the budget of the Department of Foreign Affairs and to avail of the period of interpellation. Senator Nancy Binay is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be more than willing to receive the friendly interpellations of a senator from Makati and from the Philippines who I understand would want to augment or increase the budget of a DFA. I join you in your advocacy, Senator Binay.
Thank you, Senator Lauren Legarda. I would like to ask questions concerning the Legal Assistance Fund of the DFA. What is this fund for?
The Legal Assistance Fund, Senator Binay, is the fund needed to assist our OFWs and Filipinos abroad when they are implicated in cases, and therefore lawyers must be hired for their own legal protection. And we call that the Legal Assistance Fund. Much of it was also utilized in the Kiram case. In the Kiram case, I understand for the 2014 budget, there was a 30 million allocation, and there was savings of 2013 amounting to 20 billion, 0.5. However, the available budget for 2013 was 50 billion. I'm sorry, million, 0.5. However, there were certain obligations, and so the balance is 5.4 million, and this is for the legal assistance fund. To differentiate it from the assistance to nationals fund, that is where the assistance to our Filipino overseas workers who get into trouble or whose companies close or who need to be repatriated. There is a separate fund from that, and that is around 396 million. It's 300 million, and there's 150 million augmentation, so 450 million for the assistance to nationals. There is unutilized 396 million. There's a utilized 396 million, and the balance is 66 million, Mr. President. So the legal assistance is different from the assistance to nationals, which is used for repatriation.
So, Mr. President, this Legal Assistance Fund is basically used for Filipinos who have legal
Cases.
troubles
Yes.
abroad.
Yes.
And
Mr.
for
President.
2013, how much again was the budget?
In 2014 is what I know. That's 30
30 million. And
yes.
more or less, how much is still available out of this fund?
Only 5.4, Mr. President, for this year.
And
Hopefully, the 5.4 will be sufficient to service our compatriots till the end of December.
And how many cases
How many
do we
cases?
have right now?
For the Kiram case alone, for which a large chunk of this legal assistance fund went to, there are 28 cases, but there are many cases all over the world, Mr. President. And allow me to just give you the figures. Number of cases. Let me just, it's actually a whole page for the assistance to nationals, Mr. President, for 2014.
Mr. President, I'm more concerned with the Legal Assistance Fund more than the assistant nationals fund. You said it's different?
Yes, there's an assistance to national fund and there's a legal assistance fund. 201 from January to October 31 for 2014, Mr. President. And the assistance to national justice put on record is 20,216 for a total of 20,417 for both ATN and LAF. So to answer your question, LAF would be 200 pending cases, Mr.
And
President.
I guess out of the 201 cases, we provide one lawyer per case.
It's not just one lawyer, Mr. President, but a law firm in that area that assists our Filipino.
And maybe, for example, in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, how much is the cost of hiring a law firm
How much is
for
it
a certain case?
Saudi? Per hour? Just as an estimate.
And
Per? Just an estimate, because as we know, Mr. President, the cost for a lawyer's assistance would vary depending on the law firm or the quality of the lawyer or even the jurisdiction perhaps, but more or less $10,000 for a case. But they are trying to seek, you can't ask discounts. Hindi naman dinidivisoria ang legal assistance, di ba?
Mr. President, that's for a year, that 10,000?
Per case. Per case, Mr. President.
Per case. And out of the 201, ano ho yung medyo bati, yung patapos na or kakaumpisa pa lang?
The status of the 201 cases. It's still in the litigation stage. In my understanding, Mr. President, 201 cases is still pending.
So, siguro no 2013, ilang cases ho yung na-resolve? And maybe for 2014, ilan na rin ho yung na-resolve na cases?
Does it mean that 246 were assisted or yeah, cases were resolved?
That was the number of the people who assisted,
Meaning the cases were resolved?
more or less.
You were asking, Mr. President, on the 2013 cases that were resolved, there were 246 that were resolved in 2013. And 2012, if you wish to know, was 627 in terms of assisted legally.
And for 2014, is there an available figure?
The 201 is pending for 2014. That's ongoing cases.
And out of the 246 resolved, ano ho yung percentage na nanalo ang Philippine government or yung OFW?
These numbers, which I mentioned, Mr. President, were the number of cases that were brought to the attention of the DFA in the various jurisdictions. But as to the results of whether they won or not, how much they received, etc., would not be in my possession now. However, we could probably request the DFA at the proper time to give you a breakdown so that you will have an idea on the cases. Let's say for the year of 2013, so that we understand what kind of cases are filed against our OFWs and was it resolved in their favor or not. So we would request that of the DFA, please.
So, Mr.
I would not have possession of
So,
those
Mr. President, the
information.
term resolved is not the proper word because you don't know whether it's already finished or...
Hindi. Itong mga naka-
Maybe, Mr. President, the correct term should be acted upon. Kasi either nanalo or natalo. $14,000. So, i-divide mo by 13 million.
Were resolved, whether favor or not, but tapos na sa kaso. So it's possible all of this was still pending. But these are solutions that these were resolved.
Ilang law firm sa'yo na? Kasi sa 1 million, dalawa, more or less. So 30. Lawyers. Eh, 201 cases.
Thank you for your inquiry, Mr. President. Just to clarify the earlier statement, the 201 for 2014, the 246 for 2013 and onwards, where number of Filipinos assisted on behalf, on their legal assistance. It does not mean necessarily that all these cases have been terminated because there has been a favorable or unfavorable resolution. However, it is important to note that perhaps many of these have been acted upon and have been assisted and have been resolved, but we don't have the exact number now per case on which have been resolved. May I request, Your Honor, that the committee, through the DFA, will provide you before the end of the week the cases that were resolved already and those which are pending.
Mr. President, is it possible to get the listing by tonight?
I'm sure you have that in the DFA.
Because like with the other agencies,
You will have it
that we
before the
discussed.
end of our hearings today.
okay.
Yes, of our plenary. Thank
And
you.
for 2015, how much is the budget for LAF?
What's our... It's 30 million for assistance to legal assistance.
Still 30 million.
30.
So there was no increase for
30.
next year's budget.
Yes. And for the social welfare attaché, the SWD Cotabato representatives were able to conduct a home visit to her family, and the result of said home visit was relayed to Ms. Alagasi through the social welfare attaché. Post secured the services of Al-Keraji Law Office to legally represent Ms. Alagasi in her case against the accused Safia. It should be noted that Post was informed by the prosecutor's office that the case filed by Ms. Alagasi against Safia was dismissed. However, Post was able to receive information that cases against Ms. Alagasi were filed by her employer and the accused Safia. Post has not officially received the said complaints. Post also was able to meet with attorney Keraji regarding the dismissal of Alagasi's case, and the lawyer discussed possible legal remedies for Ms. Alagasi. According to the lawyer, the dismissal by the prosecutor's office is only with respect to the public rights aspect of the case. An objection may be made with respect to the same dismissal. Said dismissal, however, does not preclude the filing of the private rights aspect of her case, which may be done directly before the court. Alagasi is presently staying at Bahay Kalinga. Post has earlier reported that Ms. Alagasi was able to receive 18,000, what is SAR? Saudi Riyal, representing her 1 year salary. Post has also reported that Alagasi's family in the Philippines was able to receive the amount of 250,000 pesos. What is a PRA? From the Philippine Recruitment Agency for the settlement of her case against her agencies. And October 28 this year, the lawyer and Ms. Alagasi, assisted by the ATN case officer, had a meeting in the embassy regarding her case, and the lawyer requested Alagasi to narrate the scalding incident and the events that transpired after. And the lawyer is currently holding Alagasi's power of attorney, which was noted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He will be using said document to represent Alagasi in court. A meeting between Ambassador Ezedin Tago, and attorney, the lawyer, Keraji, is scheduled on November 20 at the Ambassador's office. That is the brief of the case, Mr. President.
Mr. President, based on experience with this kind of cases, when can Alagasi possibly go home?
Because she is appealing the case despite its dismissal, Mr. President, it stands to reason that she must be physically present there. And if she opts to return home, I am certain that she can utilize the funds from the Assistance to National Funds for her repatriation, for her trip. However, that would mean perhaps a dismissal eventually of her case that she has filed.
Yeah, but there is a similar case filed against her, the slander case. So it's not only his case against her employer, but it's the employer's case
So can
against
she go home?
her.
No? The lawyers are studying that, Mr. President, because of the cases that were mentioned, and perhaps after the meeting, which was November 20, was last week, we will know what transpired. I will not be knowledgeable or competent to answer you as to the status of her legal cases.
Okay. How many similar maltreatment cases involving domestic workers in Saudi Arabia have been dismissed for the past 3 years?
Would you have it?
Because we should also look into the ability of our lawyers there, because if all our cases against the employer are dismissed, then it's not a good performance. And how many cases have we actually won using the legal assistance fund? How many we have lost and how many we have won?
The information is not with us right now.
Yeah.
But again, just like the request of Senator Binay, if Your Honor would agree,
Yeah.
we can have the information ready before the end of office hours today.
Okay. Did the embassy even ask the lawyer that it hired as to why the case filed by Pahima against her employer was dismissed? Was there a reason given why it was dismissed?
I mentioned that. I think that was mentioned in the outline of the case. It was dismissed
because of
because the dismissal by the prosecutor's office is only with respect to the public rights aspect of the case, but the objection may be made with respect to the dismissal, and it does not preclude the filing of the private rights aspect of her case, which may be done directly with the court. It's the first time that I hear of this case, Mr. President, and that's all I can say about this case. I could not ascertain what else the lawyer of this Filipina would suggest that she does.
Mr. President, I suggest that when they make a report on how many cases they have won and how many cases they have lost, maybe they can expound on why they lost this case.
Yeah.
And of course,
By today?
how many cases how much is the budget of the of course we have increased the budget for the legal assistance fund to 100 million from 30 million. How much is the budget for repatriation of the DFA?
ATM. It's 300 million for 2014, Mr. President.
So
And
what-
there was 150 million from the palace. Yes, to augment that, so 450 million was allocated for this year, Mr. President.
for 2015 or
2014.
now it's 2015, diba? We're talking
For
of
the
budget.
2015 budget,
Yes.
350 for next year's budget 2015.
Okay.
But there's a balance of 66 million for the 2014 budget.
Does the DFA assure us that if we refer a case to you for repatriation or legal assistance, that you will readily do it?
Yes, Mr. President, of
Okay.
course.
That's okay. and another.
I asked them the same thing before Your Honor arrived, and because, again, there were also wives of OFWs in Saudi who came to my office asking for assistance for repatriation, only to realize that for 2 years they've been asking for assistance, and I was wondering why they could not come home. And I was wondering, maybe the DFA did not have the funds or the embassy, but they were waiting for salaries, back salaries, etc. So they also, the husbands, didn't want to come home until they collected. So it's not only sometimes a matter of not having the payment for their tickets, but also for cleaning
Some
up
other
everything.
reason.
Yes, yes.
But I have knowledge of so many who have exit permit, and it's so hard to get an exit permit, and after they have gotten exit permit, they were not repatriated. So I just want to make assurance that if they have an exit permit and they want to be repatriated, that you will readily repatriate them. That is the only assurance I want.
Yes, Mr. President, that assurance is given, and in fact, we senators should not even ask for assurance because that is part of the mandate and the duty of the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Maybe we should place it on record.
It is on record, Mr. President, of course.
Because it's very hard to ask
And assistance
for
to nationals
repatriation
is part of one of the pillars of
Yeah.
diplomacy efforts, Mr. President, and I will make sure that this function is performed by a DFA, which in fact they've been doing. And to be fair, they've been trying within their resources and limited personnel as well.
Another question, Mr. President. How many administrative complaints against embassy personnel are still pending with DFA?
Administrative. Who's in charge of admin? There's only one. In what jurisdiction? There is only one pending administrative complaint, Mr. President.
And what is that administrative complaint, Mr. President?
The case, I believe, is negligence in the performance of his or her function.
Who is the person?
Would you want to put the name of the person on record?
Yeah, because there is an issue here that when will the DFA issue a decision on the sexual harassment case filed by a domestic worker against Philippine ambassador to Kuwait, Shulan Primavera? The case has been dragging on for more than 2 years, and both parties have submitted their final memoranda to the DFA 4 months ago. Ambassador Primavera has since retired from the service, and the OFW complaint is still waiting for DFA decision. The alias used by the OFW complainant is Mabel. She filed a formal complaint alleging that Ambassador Primavera physically and verbally abused and harassed her on 3 occasions. She participated in all the hearings called by the DFA for the past 2 years. Since the case still pending resolution, will the DFA grant Ambassador Shulan his retirement pay and other benefits? Should this be withheld until the DFA finally decides on the case?
Yes, Mr. President. The department has finished its internal processes regarding the case of Ambassador Primavera. The department has sent a memorandum for the President on September of this year with the documents, with the recommendations for the President's decision. Unfortunately, I may not be in a position, it may not be fair if I reveal the decision on record now because it is for the President's eyes and decision.
So it has the President has the final say
Yes,
on this.
Mr. President. Those are the recommendations made based on the conduct of the internal investigation of the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Okay. In the meantime, nakuha ba niya yung kanyang retirement pay and benefits?
It is being withheld, Mr. President.
Okay.
He does not have.
Okay. It was clear that when we had these sex for flight hearings, Mr. President, it was clear that the one country team approach in our diplomatic post was not being followed when it comes to reporting and acting on sexual harassment complaints of OFWs against embassy personnel. What reforms had been undertaken since the Senate investigation to ensure that all embassy personnel, including the ambassadors, observe proper decorum in treating our workers, especially domestic workers in the Bahay Kalinga shelters?
Mr. President, when that became an issue of national significance, it was brought to our attention also here in this chamber. The shelters were only managed by the DOLE. Now the DFA is involved in the management of the shelter, and definitely the need for gender sensitivity in the handling of female OFWs in distress was given importance. In fact, ongoing are gender sensitivity trainings and workshop globally, not only in areas which are sensitive. And in fact, this should be mainstreamed into not just the DFA, but in every department, whether you have a post abroad, an attaché abroad, or even here, because our laws, whether it's a Magna Carta for women or the Women, Gender and Development Act, which was, 15, 20 years ago, already states that. Even the Philippine Senate should comply with our gender sensitivity trainings and workshop. So it goes without saying. However, because of this unfortunate incident, this has been given more focus, and I will also request the DFA to give us a template of the kind of workshops you do for gender sensitivity, so that we can also provide it to your honor, so that if there is a need to improvise, so that there is better gender sensitivity training, then we will give our inputs as well.
Will it be a good suggestion, Mr. President, if we ask that they send a female labor attaché to those places where we have plenty of female domestic helpers?
That right now, female na. It's the DOLE that sends the attachés. It's being done according to the secretary. That can be a suggestion worth taking, perhaps with our female Secretary of Labor. Maybe Your Honor can make the suggestion during the DOLE budget, but it's already done.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we have many qualified and competent female labor attachés.
Maybe we can ask our chairman of our committee on budget to talk to the DOLE.
But you know, Mr. President, maski na ang labor attaché natin ay babae, kung meron at meron gusto mangharas at hindi nakakaintindi kung paano i-handle ang ating mga kababaihan here or abroad, there will always be violations.
Yeah,
so
I know.
it's important that everyone understands the importance of proper ethics and respect and honor.
I'm just asking if it will help, if we have...
That I think that would help, yes.
Okay. Because they can relate more to women.
May I just also inform Your Honor that we use the ILO, the International Labor Organization, as a resource person for our gender sensitivity trainings in selected areas where they are represented. No? Okay. And also, Mr. President, I have this information just now. Dr. Lyndon Lee Sui, the DOH spokesperson, said this: 3 volunteers from San Lazaro Hospital will join the team to West Africa to help assess the situation of OFWs in Ebola-affected countries, and the DFA is in charge of the itinerary. With this statement, Mr. President, may we request the DFA to contact the volunteers of San Lazaro with the Office of Acting Secretary Garin or Dr. Lee Sui, who gave this statement. And I thank Your Honor for bringing this to national attention and in this budget, because otherwise this is just one of the many things that probably would have been delayed. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may I now ask that you recognize Senator Soto, whom I understand intends to make a
Senator Soto is recognized
Manifestation.
on the DFA budget. Thank you, Senator Soto, for turning your lectern around and addressing the chair.
Yes, thank you very much also, the Senate President. Mr. President, as I said, I come from the old school and I never turn my back to the presiding officer. I would just like to commend the DFA, Mr. President. So I will definitely support their budget. I commend them for their swift action, and particularly Ms. Mila Cruz, the Executive Assistant in the Office of the Secretary, and the ATN section of the Philippine Embassy in Abu Dhabi, because there was an OFW who was forced into prostitution, who was able to send a message to them, and they rescued her right away and was sent home to her family. So with that, I definitely support 101% the budget of the DFA. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Soto. The chair, Senator Escudero.
Mr. President, no other member registered to interpolate on the proposed budget of the Department of Foreign Affairs to include the Office of the Secretary, the Foreign Service Institute, the Technical Cooperation Council of the Philippines, the UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines, to include the International Commitments Fund. May I therefore move that we close the period of interpolation and debate and consider the same as submitted. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. The debate on the budget of the Department of Foreign Affairs, including the attached agencies, are hereby terminated, and the same is hereby submitted.
May I request for a minute suspension, Mr.
1
President.
minute suspension. Sorry to delay you for what?
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, may I now move that we open the period of interpellation and debate for the proposed budget.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Secretary of National Defense, Secretary Gasmin, as well as his staff. However, no member registered to interpolate on the proposed budget of the DND to include the DND proper or the Office of the Secretary, the Government Arsenal, the National Defense College of the Philippines, the Office of Civil Defense, the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office proper, the Veterans Memorial Medical Center, Philippine Army, Philippine Air Force, Philippine Navy, and the General Headquarters, AFP, and AFP wide service support units. May I therefore move that we close the period of interpellation and debate and to consider the same as submitted. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. The debates on the budget of the Department of National Defense is hereby terminated. And upon motion, the same is hereby submitted for consideration of the Chamber, including the offices attached to the Department of National Defense, namely DND proper, Government Arsenal, National Defense College of the Philippines, Office of the Civil Defense, Philippine Veteran Affairs Office, Veterans Memorial Medical Center, Philippine Army, Philippine Air Force, Philippine Navy. Any objection? Hearing none, so submitted.
Mr. President, may I now move that we open the period of interpellation and debate for the proposed
Debates on the budget.
Mr. President.
The deliberation of the budget of the Office of the Ombudsman is in order.
I so move, Mr. President.
Before we act on the motion, we acknowledge the presence of Ombudsman Chief Carpio Morales and the Deputy Ombudsman. They are present on the hall. Is there any objection to the motion of Senator Escudero? There being none, the budget of the period of debates of the budget of the Office of the Ombudsman is hereby terminated, and the same is submitted for the consideration of the Senate.
Mr. President, may I now move that we open the period of interpellation and debate for the proposed budget of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to include, Mr. President, the Office of the Secretary, the Environmental Management Bureau, the Mines and Geosciences Bureau, the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority, the National Water Resources Board, as well as the Palawan Council for Sustainable Development staff. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Consideration of the budget of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources in order.
Mr. President, no member registered to interpolate. May I therefore move that we close the period of interpellation and debate and consider the proposed budget of the aforementioned offices and agencies under the DNR as submitted. I so move, Mr. President.
Before we act on the motion, we acknowledge the presence of Secretary Ramon Pai, the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. There is a motion that the period of debates for the budget of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources be terminated. Any objection? Hearing none, the same is hereby granted. There is a motion that we consider the budget of the DNR and its attached agencies, namely the Office of the Secretary, Environment Management Bureau, Mines and Geosciences Bureau, National Mapping and Resource Information Authority, National Water Resources Board, Palawan Council for Sustainable Development staff. Any objection? Hearing none, the budget is deemed submitted.
Mr. President, may I now move that we open the period of interpellation and debate for the proposed budget of the autonomous regional government in Muslim Mindanao. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the budget of the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao is in order.
Mr. President, we would like to place on record the presence of Governor Mujib Ataman. May I recognize Senator Soto for his intervention cum manifestation.
The presence of Governor Hataman is made of record. Senator Soto is recognized on the period of interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just perhaps one or two questions to the distinguished sponsor.
Senator Escudero, if he will yield to the floor for questions on Senator.
Willingly, Mr. President, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I monitored your budget hearing, particularly on the budget of the ARMM, and I take the extensive report that was given on the achievements of the ARMM. But I also monitored your question to them. How was the question answered, Mr. President?
Which question is that, Mr. of questions, including
Well-
if he has eaten lunch.
There was this particular question that the sponsor, Mr. President, asked them when the sponsor was given a very extensive report on the achievements of ARMM. So I understand that the sponsor asked them why they are going to be dissolved if they are very successful and if they have extensively that the ARM is expected to deliver as basic services to the people of ARMM.
I remember asking that question, Mr. President, Your Honor. Ang tanong ko po, kung base sa accomplishment report ninyo, napakaganda na ng ARM at napakaganda ng trabahong ginagawa nyo at maraming reforma nang napatupad, ba't pa natin i-create yung
BBL.
BBL?
No, the BB, yes.
Para palitan yung ARMM, maganda na pala ang palakad at patak ang nginit yan.
Ano po ang naging sagot doon, tugon sa inyong katanungan na yun?
Galing po sa ilong niya, mas maganda daw ho yung BBL. But
Buti.
Mr. President, seriously, so that it's on the record, Mr. President, they have begun and started reforms in the ARMM. The BBL is to achieve not only reforms but peace as well in the area. It is hoped that the reforms begun and started and initiated by the ARMM will be continued under the BBL so that whatever goals and objectives they achieved will even be greater given reforma ng napat in parts of Mindanao.
All right. Given that, Mr. President, po ang naging 15. So therefore, we do not expect the passed within the year.
Mr. President, we provided for a transitory provision taking into account and recognizing the possibility that the BBL will be passed by ARMM shall be governed by the Bangsa Transition Authority. We provided for a transitory provision taking into account and recognizing the possibility to interpolate, may therefore move that we close the period of interpolation and debate for the proposed budget of the ARMM. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the budget of the autonomous region. Nasaan na si... Sige, sir. Okay lang.
Ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, may I move that we open budget and for Senator Legarda to sponsor the proposed budget and Senator Soto, whom I understand
Commission on Audit is in order. Senator Law, the principal sponsor, is recognized to defend the budget, and on the period of interpellation, the acting minority leader is recognized.
Thank you. Aside from the fact, Mr. President, that we trust the subcommittee chairman, it's also the birthday of Chairman Pulido Tan. Therefore, we have no interpellations on the budget of the...
Thank the minority leader once again. Budget of the Commission on Audit, Mr. President.
Well, we just, the
Mr.
blowout would be sufficient.
Sir Soto, Mr. President, no other member same.
Just hope that the magnanimity of the audit of the COA on our Senate fund.
The audit of
Yes. The chair moving her head. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Anyway, levity aside, any objection? Consideration of the chamber in plenary.
May I
Thank
request
you.
for a minute suspension.
Sure. But yeah, pati the budget itself. Yeah.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of House Bill number 4968. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection hearing on consideration of House Bill 4968 is hereby suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend session until 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon today, of course, Mr. President.
Session is suspended until